Greetings. Well, today we're going to do a autumn stream, and let's get started here with the drawing. And it's 11 by 15. It's a quarter sheet, 300-pound Saunders cold press paper. The drawing is going to be not real tight, because it's not going to be a real tight watercolor, and the amount of information that I'm going to put in is just what I would feel is just enough for the type of painting that it's going to be. So when you're doing your drawing, if you want something really tight and really specific, then that drawing should correspond to that. So in this case, this is a very direct type of painting, so there should be enough information. And I often tell my students, to make sure that you draw enough. I mean, I think that often we shorten our drawings. Everybody is anxious to paint, and so it's important that you have a sufficient amount of information. You don't need everything unless you're painting a very specific, almost photorealistic type watercolor. But you should have a variety of the shapes. The division of the composition should make sense to you. And if you notice that in this, the line drawing for the watercolor has various values. Some of those lines are really light and some are darker. And I think that's really critical. One, you don't want to lose your drawing in the painting process, and so you want to make sure that you have enough information to go forward. So this is my palette. I know it looks terrible, but it works. These are the colors that I'm going to be using throughout the painting, and I'll be talking about certain mixes as we go along. The first area that's going to be painted is the sky. It's the lightest value, so this is a very light, very wet sky that's put in, very diluted. And so you notice there's a little bit of cad orange and then manganese. So I often will put a little bit of an underpainting of a warm color underneath a blue sky. Usually, even if there's no clouds, there's no atmospheric things, I just like a little bit of warmth underneath. Not too much, because obviously blue and orange could make brown. But and so as far as the video is concerned, what I didn't show you is I'm usually using the blow dryer in between each step, and so I'm trying to dry the painting. I've also sped up some of this stuff, and some of it I've kept at real speed. I know it's hard sometimes when the videos are so compressed. It's unrealistic. And so some of this stuff you'll see is I'll start an area in real time, so you can just sort of get a feel for the application of paint, and then I'll speed it up so that so we're not here all day. So the actual painting took about an hour and 20 minutes, I think, and I think we've got this video down to about 20 some minutes. So I've cut out some of the pausing and mixing on the palette and things like that. So early on, you want to get your brightest colors in. You want to establish all of that early. So what has to be on white paper? Well, what has to be on white paper are those really distinct color areas, and so that really dictates where you begin, at least where I begin. And so in this painting we have a lot of really bright color areas. We have all this fall color, and so and you'll notice I'll toggle sort of between brushes. That's a 1/2 inch flat, and then I will sometimes use a big like mop quill. They're synthetic. The black handled brushes are Silver Brush Black Velvets, which is a blend of squirrel hair and synthetic, and then the other larger brush is a Princeton Neptune, which is synthetic squirrel, and so it holds a lot of paint. And so I'll go back and forth between, sometimes multiple brushes, depending on the size of the area that I'm painting, and it also depends on the type of mark that I want to make. So that little 1/2 inch flat here is really great for, it doesn't hold a ton of paint, and so it breaks down, the wash breaks down rather quickly, and allows me then to get some really interesting marks, dry brush marks, some interesting edges. So I really like it when I'm painting trees and grasses and things like that. The mix is, there's two main yellows here, which is Hansa Yellow Light and Gamboge, and there's also quinacridone red, which is added for some of the warmer, like the oranges and reds that are in the piece. It's a fairly limited, its primary palette will dominate most of these mixes. The main green that you see that I repeatedly use is cobalt blue and Hansa, or cobalt blue and Gamboge, and that's, so it's really just red, yellow, blue. There's a few additions where I'll add perhaps an earth tone here or there, but for the most part it's going to be primary palette, and I think that's for most of my paintings. I would prefer to mix my greens. I mix up a lot of my earth tones, but occasionally you need to have an expanded palette for certain color areas. So in this, this is the initial wash, but I'm very concerned with getting color. You want color early on. I don't want to put in anything that's real neutral. So this is, that's the inclusion of ultramarine blue right into the mix. And those are, that's a red, yellow, blue mix that gives me kind of an earthy color. So, I'm just concerned when you take a warm and a cool and you put them up against one another, that's often how we get mud. And so I am a little concerned in that section there under the tree that I don't get too muddy. So I try to keep the colors a little bit separated, knowing that, I can always make this painting more neutral and cooler, but it's impossible to warm it up or to get brighter color if I get too much neutral. So here I'm adding ultramarine blue into the mix, new Gamboge, and that gives me a really kind of a deep olive green, but on the blue side. And so really when you're mixing your greens, just adjusting the ratio of blue to yellow will determine the temperature. So in this case, it's blue dominant, so it's going to be a lot cooler. And so that's for the initial application for these pine trees that are in the background. And you see the mark making that little brush, that 1/2 inch flat, does for me. So turning it on its side, pushing it. It's not just a typical 45-degree application. Sometimes the brush is lowered, the side of the brush is used, the tip of the brush is used, so you get a lot of variety on your mark making. So again, this also presents a challenge here in that you have red up against green, and we know that red and green, when they mix, they neutralize each other. So I'm trying to put them in positions where they're blending, but just on the edges, keeping it kind of soft, without getting too much of a mix that would end up being real muddy. And so that's as you're working throughout your painting, always be concerned with that, like what's going to happen when I layer over top of this, or what happens if these two colors are wet and they blend. Is it going to make a color that isn't useful for my painting, or if it's too dead? And so that's one of the myriad of things that we have to worry about in watercolor. That's what makes it so difficult sometimes. So it's really, you see the base of my initial wash, and that literally sets the tone for the rest of the painting. So this is this part right here, these shadows underneath along the bank. It's the first inclusion of a darker value, and so that's where I brought in. It's definitely blue dominant, probably ultramarine blue, maybe even a little phthalo with quinacridone burnt orange. That's an earth tone. It's kind of like burnt sienna, but it's a little bit brighter. And so when that mixes with like phthalo blue, just a little bit of phthalo blue, because it's very strong, is enough to give you a nice dark, rich, kind of a greenish, dark value tint. So there's my main base green, which is the cobalt blue and Hansa yellow, and then the inclusion of gamboge makes a warmer green, because gamboge is a warmer yellow. And so going back and forth. Now there's manganese, and so the manganese, I like manganese because it's a nice cool blue. It's not a real strong color, so when you need to have a nice cool bluish tint, almost like a spruce tree, manganese or cerulean would probably work too. But I think I like manganese. It's a little brighter. And so this is, now we're getting into our medium values, and I'm concerned with just getting, breaking up. So if you look at that first wash, that's one big shape that merges from the stream bank all the way up into the trees. And then the second one is we break that shape into smaller shapes. And so now we're going in and we're separating the trees from the stream bank. And so that's really the process. Big shapes to medium shapes to small shapes. And if you follow that in your paintings, you have some sense of control and a bit of hierarchy as far as, okay, what should I paint next? So again, here's this mixture of greens, cool greens into earth tones. And so you have this transition area. And again, this is always, you have to be really careful that you don't overlap too much, because this is an area that could get pretty muddy and pretty dead very quickly just by having those blues mixed with those earthy colors. And you have something that's much too neutral. Not that it's going to, totally kill the painting. It's just that something you probably want to avoid. There's a little shot of violet. So lots of times if I have a warm color like an orangey, red orange, I love bringing little bits of blue or violet into that. That's a nice way to darken it. So here I'm using my fingernail to just sort of scratch in a few lights for these weeds that are growing in there. The paper can't be completely dry. So before I did this, I used a blow dryer for about, 20 seconds just to set it a little bit. And then that allowed me to then go in and scratch those in. So now this is cobalt blue, and the initial first wash, and this is in real time, so you can kind of see I'm being very deliberate to sort of trust my drawing and go in and put in these where the sky is being reflected into the water. That's a size 6 brush. That's a black velvet round. And so, the colors that have to go down first, we always think of, your warmer colors as being those, but that also includes your cooler colors. If you need a nice clean blue, you can't put that down on a wash that's already been put down. So that goes down on white paper, and that's why we painted around. I painted around those trees because the larger tree has a distinct color. I mean, it's like a blue violet that's coming out of the tree, and so it's important to leave white paper so that color can come out. If I took the yellow across that when I was with my initial underpainting, then you'd have yellow underneath the violet, so it wouldn't be nearly as colorful. And so, you know, where the tree trunks are dark, you know, just a dark color, which doesn't have a lot of color note coming from it, then you can underpaint that. You can go with a wash right over top of it. But where you want a more distinctive color note, then you do have to do some reverse painting and leave that. You could mask. I don't mask, use masking fluid very much, if at all. I tend to reverse paint most of that stuff, but there are certainly exceptions. Nocturnes, you know, with lights and things like that, or say you're doing a lake with a sailboat and there's a sail against the sky. You know, those are perfect candidates for masking fluid. But this type of painting, you know, the woods or kind of these type of landscapes, I tend not to use masking fluid. Occasionally I'll use masking tape and lay that over a shape and then just cut out the shape and just leave that tape on there. But so here, you know, I'm using a size 6. This is a Velvet Touch by Princeton, just a synthetic brush, just a sort of a detail, real fine pointed round, and getting in, you know, some of those linear marks that I really like. I think that's an important aspect of this. I love doing those tree branches and getting in all of that kind of linear energy into the painting. For the reflections on the water, you know, a lot of ultramarine blue, and then I bring in some cad or some quinacridone red, which gives me a violet, and then I tone that down by bringing in the yellow. So again, a red, yellow, blue mixture. Obviously the ratios are different, and so where it's darker, it's going to be blue dominant or blue red dominant in the mix. Where it's warmer, it's obviously going to be yellow red dominant in the mix. And so that pattern is repeated throughout this painting. And but if I would point to one area, it's usually the same, maybe the same 3 colors, but they look distinctly different, and it's only because the ratio has changed. So here we're getting into, you know, much earthier colors. So that's a red yellow with just a little bit of blue to neutralize it. And again, the blue on the water has been dry, so there's no, you know, I don't want any bleeding there. So you're not seeing any, you know, where I'm blow drying and keeping the paper dry. You know, I tell my students, one of the best things you can do is just let the paper dry. Either dry it, you know, by hand with a blow dryer, or just, you know, take time, plan your painting, look at your painting, figure out what your next steps are going to be, and let the paper dry. I think when we're impatient, we end up going back in too early sometimes, and you get these bleeding edges. You get colors that are running into one another, and you're getting muddy, you know, and so here again it's dry. You can see how it's lightened, and then I'm going to go back and darken this value. So this process of adjustment goes on throughout the entire painting. With watercolor, we're always painting on white paper, and so everything we put down seems plenty dark enough. But it, you know, obviously once we get the adjacent areas painted, then we realize, gee, that water's too light. You know, it looked fine before. Well, now we're surrounding it with color, and so it's not that we made a mistake, it's just that we're, you know, adjusting on the fly. Say, okay, now that I've got color around here, I realize that value is a little bit too light. And so, you know, that's that process. We're constantly, you know, you're constantly adjusting values as you go along. As you get more information in front of you, you know, just be analyzing and saying, okay, this is too light. Very rarely is it too dark. Occasionally that does happen, but sometimes, you know, most of the time it's too light, and we adjust it. So there's I've splattered. You can see how how juicy these washes are, that the paint is literally flying off of the brush before it even touches the paper. And that's what you want. You want that loaded brush. You want that bead of color, that little bit of bead at the end of each brush. And what because I'm speeding this up, you might not get the sense of how often I am reloading and also reinforcing all my colors. So here's the quinacridone burnt orange with ultramarine blue to get this real rich dark, and starting again to put in these darker values. And this is, we got to get these darker values in. Once we get the darker values, then we can analyze and say, okay, are medium values dark enough? If they're not, you reinforce them, glaze over it, hit it with another wash. This is the first inclusion of Van Dyke Brown up in the corner and Permanent Brown. And that's for really dark. I mean, it's not black, but it's a very, very dark earth tone. And for these little edges here, this is not a real heavy painting. I mean, it's primarily a middle value and light value painting, and so it's important to have a few choice darks in there just to have a little bit of dynamics in your value. And so here we go with, now we're on our third layer back here, and I think that's probably about right for these really deep values that are underneath the trees. And so we're, when we first put them on, they look plenty dark enough. Now we have color all over, and we're like, what, this has to go darker. These trees have to get darker. And so the other thing that happens in watercolor, of course, is that our values are going to dry lighter. Our paints are going to dry lighter as they dry. And so, it's keep analyzing that and saying, okay, is this shape, falling away too much? This is where it's a good idea to take your painting, certainly at this stage, set it up, back up from it, and look to see, are there certain shapes that are weak and should be stronger, or are they right in their sort of the right position as far as how they relate to everything? And so at this stage, everything's in here, and now it's just little details, which are limbs and weeds and a lot of calligraphy, sort of mark making, to give the painting some energy, which I really like. I like a messy woods, so I like putting in all those little marks. Can you get too much? Sure. So you have to sort of balance it between enough texture, enough mark making to give you the energy that you want out of the painting, or the specific information that you want, without overwhelming the overall structure of the painting, the values, the big shapes and stuff. And so, if you look at I've thrown in the photo throughout the painting so you can keep referencing it. There's so much more information in the photo than what I'm actually putting in here. This is a distillation, a suggestion of the image. And it's not a complete sort of photorealistic rendering. I mean, that's really not our goal. I'm using a rigger here to put in some of these leaf textures. It's just a real fine, detail brush with real long hairs, and so it makes great linear marks, but it also makes some really interesting leaf and calligraphic type of broken marks. And so I liked using it in the trees to get some texture. Right up there, right at where that one tree is leaning in, I kind of wished I had put more limbs out in that area. So here we're including, this is some white gouache, and I'm adding, I just pick up really undiluted paint, in this case gamboge, and these are just little accents that I'm putting in, just breaking up some of these shapes, giving it a little energy. Probably, you know, is it really necessary? I don't know, maybe not, but I like it. I usually include a little bit of that in most of my paintings. I love that inclusion of some opaque touches against all the transparency. So I do use that quite a bit. You don't want to overdo it. You make the painting way too heavy. But just a little touches here and there are really, you know, I think very useful. I think this is the last of the limbs that go in, and then this is cobalt blue mixed with the white, just for these little cool touches where the water meets the shoreline. I think that tree that's leaning, I wish I had a couple more limbs coming out to the left of the painting. I think that's one. It's a little awkward right there, but I think I do add one coming there coming across, which I think helps, breaks that up a little bit, but probably could add more. But this is the final touches, just a few last darks, and we're gonna call it. So this is the same, you know, ultramarine blue mix. That's you know, just to punch it out, and so that's it. That's the painting. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you picked up some tips or learned something today. And I'll be having, I have, you know, several videos on there, and hopefully have some new ones coming out. So please share this video with somebody, and subscribe so that you can get notified when I have a new one. And I appreciate you guys joining me today. Thanks.